So, welcome to Bodhicitta Dakini Monastery. Um, Today, I'm speaking about Samvega, or spiritual urgency, and this is a teaching from the Theravada tradition. So, actually, everything that you want to know about the early Buddhist teachings can pretty much be found in 3 books, which is not that big. It's like, you know, it's called the Pali Canon, although the Pali Canon contains many more books than this. But in terms of the early direct teachings, there's the short, middle, and long discourses of the Buddha. So the short is Samyutta Nikaya, the medium length is the Majjhima Nikaya, and the long one is Anguttara Nikaya. So yeah, they're up there actually. And you can find these online at Sutta Central or Access to Insight. Yeah, but Samvega can be translated as spiritual inspiration, spiritual awe, like an arousing of energy, like when you watch a horror movie or you hear the door slam late at night and like goosebumps come up, But what it really means is you get a sense of motivation to pursue the truth, to really sincerely devote yourself to seeking peace and seeking a wise life and seeking transformation. And of course, none of us are the same. So it's a huge mistake to impose religion on people as a cookie cutter way. There's nothing worse than evangelizing, because one, spirituality is personal and nobody is the same. So that's why there are so many spiritual paths to suit different people. And that's why we have to have a live and let live approach, to people, because no one is the same. What is true for you, what your life experiences are, may not be true for me. We think we live in the same world, but actually, for example, the experience of an Aboriginal person in Australia, their history is so very different. Their experience is so very different to, say a Chinese person of Chinese background, immigrant, or someone who's like 4th generation convict descent. None of us have the same experiences. And that's why we need to live with compassion and listen to each other and practice deep listening and mutual respect and care, and to really develop empathy for each other's different experiences. But Samvega is, it can come about through many ways. Like the Buddha, who was a historical Indian prince, he saw 4 things that made him take up the spiritual path. One was like old age. He saw a really old, sick person. He saw a very old person who their body wasn't functioning well anymore, and he like really close to death, and he just realized, wow, this is my destination, and my life is finite. And then he saw a dead person, and he asked his friend, what is this? Because his father had protected him, hoping that he wouldn't take up the spiritual path, that he would just be an ambitious king. But the future Buddha had a lot of sensitivity and compassion. So seeing this suffering really pierced his heart deeply. When you really see something that moves you and you just go, wow, what's it all about? Maybe it could be a starry night. Maybe it doesn't have to be suffering. It could be something beautiful where you just go, what's the mystery of it all? Or you just see nature. You go walking in nature and you're like, wow, what is this all about? Like I'm part of this mystery, and you feel a sense of something bigger than yourself. So the Buddha saw, birth, old age, sickness, and death. But mostly he saw old age. He saw an old person. He saw a very sick person lying on the side of the road whose body was like half swollen and lots of wounds. In those days, you know, no antibiotics, not very good medical care. So when you got sick, when you got seriously ill, you could die. You most likely would die. And life expectancy was like 35, you know, not long. Tough life, you know. And childhood illnesses like, smallpox, leprosy, all of these things were widespread, that would leave scars on people, polio, you know. So he saw, a sick person, an elderly person, and then he saw a corpse. And he also said to his friend, you know, what is this? Like, and his friend said, you know, that person is as lifeless as a piece of wood. Their mind has departed and their loved ones will never see them again. And so in India, it's quite normal to see a body on a bamboo platform being carried through the street. Whereas here we hide it away, which I think is a mistake. I mean, in the old days, we had wakes. We would care for the body ourselves and then take it to the mortuary, you know, or the funeral home or whatever. It was much more understood, that part of life. And I think seeing, maybe the closest thing we have is when you're a child and you your dog dies, then you really get a sense of how fragile life is, you know. And it's such a hard but really a big learning experience, you know. I remember two of my childhood pets got run over. One died and one got run over. They both died. And it was a real learning experience to realize. And then my father died when I was 14. So these things really shocked Siddhartha and the Buddha to be, and made him realize this body is impermanent, my life is impermanent, and is there something beyond death? Is there a way out of birth and death? Is there a way out of suffering, the cycle of life that we call samsara? And then he finally saw the fourth thing, which was a sannyasi or a monk, a person who's renounced normal life and dedicates themselves to the path of awakening. And he thought that that looked like a really good option, in terms of everyone you love will die, will leave you behind. And he felt that he hadn't found a solution to the problem of birth and death and sickness, you know, that life is just utterly fragile. I mean, there are literally, I mean, it's one thing to have an elderly person that you love die because it's like their time. But when you see children that are just an hour old, or, you know, teenagers that have everything ahead of them, and they commit suicide, you know, it's so sad. Or road accidents, you know, we have some terrible road accidents in Tasmania, and it just happens like that. Like you've got money in your bank account, you've got appointments in your diary, that's it. No more you know, it just can happen anytime. It's like we also see it with our pets, like they're playing in the yard, they're happy, they're chewing on a bone, and then the gates open, whoops, no more dog, you know. So even when you love, you're certainly in the early days of love, you're very much aware that this is so rare and wonderful to have found this person I love, but knowing it may not work out. You know, they can suddenly turn around one day and go, I don't want to be with you, you know, and it's utterly impermanent. Or like when you have a child, I think, or you care for a child, it's in the back of your mind to always be vigilant that something could happen. There's always this awareness that, you know, impermanence and death are just around the corner. And maybe that becomes clearer as we get older as well, or if we have ill health. Because it is a real shock to be told, hey, this could kill you, you know. And we like to put it to the back of our mind. We don't want to know about it. We don't want to see people who are sick. It becomes hard to deal with because it reminds us of our own mortality. But actually, if you don't examine life, if you don't make friends with your own impermanence, you're not living fully. You're not fully appreciating each moment. So Buddhists don't talk about death because we're miserable pessimists, but because we want people to be fully prepared and aware to live their life fully and not take it for granted. Like the current life model that you work your guts out 50 hours a week until you're 65 or 70, and then maybe you have 5 good years before you're too sick to enjoy anything. It's like, does that really leave a lot of model for wonder or family or joy? Are we living as if we could die tomorrow? Of course, we don't all die tomorrow, so we also need superannuation. But, we also need to find time for some of our dreams and find that balance, that work-life balance, which is really not easy with the cost of living and everything. But Samvega is spiritual urgency, and it can lead you to interesting places. Like, I felt that sense of urgency when I was a teenager, and that's why I kind of left most conventional things behind, like higher education and relationships, and I was just like, what's the meaning of life? I guess I was a bit unusual for a teenager. And some of us have those inclinations when we're younger, but those seeds are not watered, because you're considered a weirdo if you're like 18 years old going, what's the meaning of life? So you hide it away, and then you wait until you're 50 before you pull out that question again. But it's actually the most important question, because it's like, what you're living, but are you fully living? Because survival is not enough. We can do more than that. We should thrive. We shouldn't just survive. And then, sometimes we can get carried away by philosophy, like we can get caught in our own mental constructs because we adopt a belief system and we get trapped by it. And we become so rigid that we actually can't have a normal encounter with wonder. Or we judge other people like, well, they're not on the spiritual path, they're not my religion, so therefore they're materialistic and sinful and or just shallow. We write people off. But everybody lives in their own universe, and you just can't know. You can't know what's in their head, so don't be judgmental. And nobody has the full license for truth, nobody knows for sure. So it's good to remain open and respectful, because everybody contains the sacred in them. But spiritual urgency is, it's just this knowledge, that life is fragile, and it's good to find some kind of peace. It's good to find some kind of truth. It's good to pursue that through your own experience. Don't be content with other people's books and other people's, what they've written about and what they've described. Test it for yourself, like a goldsmith tests gold. That's why Buddhism is a living tradition. It's not just something you get from books. And the Buddhist community, the tradition of the contemplative awakening, is a living community. And that's why your own direct experience, held by community, is really valuable, not just empty words or, sutras or whatever. Sutras are a really good guide, like a good map, but they're not, it's not enough. You need a living, awakened experience through regular meditation practice, informed by, good guides, noble friends. So the Buddha said, practice like your hair is on fire. Like a person who realizes that there is no certainty in life. And it's also maybe a sense of disillusionment as well. Like, those of us who actually do have enough materially, like we maybe own a house or we have a university education, and we're kind of like, we achieve all these life goals. I got a house, I got a partner, I got a, good job. And it's like, God, I'm bored. This isn't enough. This isn't everything I was promised in terms of the 1950s white picket fence dream. It's like, what's next? This is why grey nomads pack up their big houses and go on the road with a caravan, because they just, it's like, what's next? There must be something more interesting than this, right? Not to say that, like, not having, I think having shelter and having a livable wage is a really important foundation for human beings to thrive. Because if you're just always worried about where you're going to live and how you're going to eat, you can't really think about, what's the meaning of it all, unless you're a particularly committed person. So, yeah, but it's like there's more. There's got to be more, and that more comes from meaningful relationships with community, living for a purpose greater than yourself, service, but also, plumbing the depths of our consciousness for awakened states. People who meditate, or maybe they've taken some kind of mind-altering drug, I'm not talking about the more unwholesome ones. I'm talking about the ones that just can be useful. I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying it happens sometimes that people do those things and they just realize there is more to the world and reality and perception than we currently perceive. So whether it's through, a meditative experience or some kind of communion with nature, or it just so happens that you had a mind-altering substance, all of those things can make us understand that the mindset we currently have can be a very small window on a much greater reality, a much greater possibility. And it's a shame that people go through their whole life believing everything they think. As a child, you're filled with wonder, like a cookie. Your mother gives you a fresh baked piece of cake, and it's like, so you smell it. Your senses are so alive as a child. You smell it and it's beautiful. Or you sit on a swing and you feel like you're going to reach the sky, and you have a sense of wonder of what is possible. That you believe the mountain might be a dragon, or you just, you just have a much broader sense of wonder. And that sense of wonder sometimes diminishes as you get older because of too much conceptual thinking. And that conceptual thinking can make people want to kill themselves, or just make them feel numb and depressed and cynical and not much joy, because the conceptual thinking is like the clouds that obscure the pristine, boundless blue sky. And our awareness, our basic luminous awareness and purity of the mind, blissful states of mind, open-hearted states of mind, full of joy and wonder, it's like a big wet blanket on it, all this conceptual thinking, and it's really valuable to be able to go, I'm feeling depressed, I'm feeling a lot of negative thinking, I don't think I'm good enough, I don't love myself, or I just have really cynical views about the world. And some of them might be based on legitimate experiences, but everything can change every day. Every day is a new day. And it's good to not always carry the trauma of the past into the future. And sometimes you're so invested in all the things that have gone before that you're projecting forward, and you're not actually seeing other things. Like, you don't notice the beauty on the way to work as you drive, or you don't notice your partner who's there in the morning and you don't care for them. And if you don't care for these things, that sense of wonder, or that caring person, or that loving child, you'll lose those things, and your life will be more poor as a result. So in meditation, we learn to identify thoughts that aren't so useful, and feelings that may be mistaken, or perceptions that may be mistaken, and we learn to sweep away. No, we're not suppressing and we're not acting out, but we're sweeping away and not completely identifying with every thought or feeling that comes in, so that we learn to get some space, and we learn to touch base with more awakened, more luminous mind states that bring more sense of wonder, more joy, more freshness, and more of a sense of wonder that actually anything can happen, and that things change all the time, and that even difficult states pass, good and bad, loss and gain, praise and blame, fame and infamy, success and failure. They are all impermanent, and we don't have to allow every bad thing that comes to us to shape us. We have a choice about what mind states and emotions we dive into, and we also learn to process our grief, our joy, our our difficult states of mind. We learn to move through them more quickly because we don't wrap ourselves up in them and make an identity from them, because everything that happens to us in life can become very heavy, like a big coat of armor. And then, as we go through life, we're like reaching out for love, but we can't really quite get it because we're just covered in all this protection and all these past experiences. Like, even I think as you get older, like finding a new partner could be hard because you're just so much more cynical about, like, oh my God, like, oh, not another one. And it's like we're trying to reach out for love, but we've got like all this past experience and trauma and whatever that is stopping us from being fresh with a new person. And they also have their own. So it's like we both have so much baggage. We're like hoarders. We can hardly see each other. We can only see our ideas about, each other, not actually who they are. Yes. So Samvega, spiritual urgency, can motivate us to develop a regular meditation practice. And a regular meditation practice combined with a supportive teacher and community can help us break through, being too bound up in conceptual thoughts and that have taken away our joy and sense of wonder, and give us this regular meditation practice, this urgency to pursue the truth and read books and go on courses and do our own practice, do our own seeking, go on pilgrimage, travel, whatever, to break us out of that malaise. It's like cracking open an egg, to this cocoon of conceptuality we've created, to a sense of wonder, So in terms of so just knowing, death is not a failure. Death is just nature. Death is just nature. We appreciate the beautiful leaves in autumn in the park in Deloraine, the beautiful orange leaves and the yellow leaves as they fall, and we're like, ah. But as it happens to us, we're like, oh, another grey hair, But that's just nature. Having born, we must die, and we're part of the cycle of nature. And we should appreciate, because I think as people age, they get deeper, they get more, they're like a good wine, they have more woody undertones of wisdom and insight, So the point is, if we're going to get old, we might as well do a good job of it and get some wisdom, become an elder, and not just be like a useless person whose health and mind are failing, but be a wise person whose mind and health are failing. So we have something good we have some peace to cope with the fact that we're no longer hot. So, or, socially validated, because we do live in a very youth obsessed, beauty obsessed culture. So having spoken about spiritual urgency, how then do we channel that into our spiritual seeking? What does that lead on to? So I thought I'd mention the 7 factors of awakening. And that is, these factors facilitate our spiritual seeking. So the first one is mindfulness. And mindfulness is something everybody is obsessed with and talks about so much. But it's easy to talk about it and hard to do. Mindfulness is wise awareness. So bringing your awareness into everything, every moment, but especially in meditation, bringing the mind back to the object of meditation. And there's many different objects of meditation, but the easiest one we start with is the breath. And, you have the obstacles of mental dullness, where the mind gets sleepy and wanders, just get foggy. So the way to overcome that is to think of death and impermanence, and to eat less heavy food, and maybe do shorter sessions of meditation, wear less heavy clothes. And the way to overcome mental wandering, which is like distraction, the mind wanders away, is to wear less, is to wear heavier clothes, eat heavier food, and also just train the mind like you train a puppy. Short periods, reward it. It's just like bringing a puppy back. Sit, stay, to focus on the mind. The mind is not trained in the beginning, so it keeps wandering away all the time, and you just gradually have to build strength and concentration until your periods of concentration become longer. But that's a whole other teaching. Mindfulness in daily life is, bringing your mind to the wholesome, if positive states of mind like loving kindness or insight into impermanence arise, increase them, contemplate them more. And if unwholesome states of mind like hatred, aversion, cynicism come, apply the antidote. Like if it's hatred, try to practice deep understanding of the person who's challenging you. Understand that they're more than their beliefs, and maybe they've had some trauma in their life, and they're suffering. So they don't need you to hate them, because they probably already hate themselves. It's interesting. Like there was this really bigoted evangelical Christian who was like hating on gay people big time, and then it turns out he gets caught with a gay escort. So sometimes the people that are really hating people are actually themselves the ones they're hating. Because they've been given that message as a child, so they're suppressing their own, some part of themselves they can't accept. Yeah. So right mindfulness is also, it's about managing the mind, and as I spoke about before, not identifying too much with what comes into our mind, having a bit of space between experience and reaction, and being fully present, and just allowing things to wash over you without holding on to them for so long. And there's a difference between something washing over you and being disassociated. Being disassociated is a denial of something, but having something wash over you and not holding on to it too long is a different thing. It's feeling it, but just not completely being lost in it, identifying with it, There's a difference. Hopefully you can understand the difference. Like it's like the spiritual people who are like, I'm not angry, and then they're really passive aggressive. Whereas, yes, I'm angry, but I'm working on those feelings, and I'm not projecting them or acting out on them, and I know my anger is impermanent. I'm taking care of it. Mindfulness also, coming back to daily life, when you're every act just becomes an act of meditation, doing one thing at a time and slowing down. Like when you're chopping vegetables, just chop vegetables. When you're eating your meal, don't just look at your phone and look at the TV. Be there tasting your food, because having enough to eat is a gift. And that is a beautiful experience, to just be present with peace and to slow down. And at first it sounds boring, but actually when you go on meditation retreat, you really slow down, and all the sensory input becomes so much more fresh, and you feel a sense of joy and freedom, because your mind is not in the past or running to the future. You recover your sense of wonder and your humanity, your kindness, your empathy. So, returning to the present moment is so restorative and healing. So then comes investigation of dharmas, investigation of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, of the body, feeling, perception, and objects of mind. So everything, sensations in the body, thoughts and feelings that come into the mind, and just looking at them and seeing their impermanence, and not being carried away, not grasping too much. And then, so then comes energy, which is like when you live with mindfulness and you live ethically, you get a sense of inner space and freedom and joy. Because actually, like, thinking too much gives you a kind of emotional tiredness that's actually more taxing than a physical tiredness. Like, I think it's interesting, probably in the healing professions, there is this kind of compassion fatigue of just watching other people suffer that is probably more exhausting than the actual physical thing of lifting them out of bed. You know, it's just watching people suffer and worrying about life so much that we have in the modern world, you know, this kind of emotional tiredness and stress. So when we live in the present moment, when we take care of our mind, we have freed up a lot of mental and energy space because we're not obsessing too much. It's like when sometimes you're very anxious about something and you project the worst possible outcome and then it doesn't happen and you're so relieved. But you created this whole drama in your head, right? So yeah, living with mindfulness, living with ethics, you free up a lot of mental energy. And when you have a regular meditation practice, you develop concentration, which develops a sense of bliss, which is the next one, joy. It's not just joy like, I've won a new car. It's like joy like pasada, which is like a pacified mind, a peaceful mind. You're on the edge of concentration, of samadhi. It's this really nice, it's not like a dullness, like as if you're in Bali and you just had a really big meal and you're just really chill, but it's like this natural peace that comes when your mind is not afflicted, when your mind is becoming calm, like a still forest pool. Your mind is not always agitated, because most of the time our mind is like a jar of water and you're like, you know, bills, partner, job, education, be enough, you know. Whereas we just make friends with who we are and our mind becomes calm and we're not overthinking everything. But in a serious meditation practice, energy becomes this joy, this joyful, concentrated mind that doesn't need a lot of sensory pleasure or external validation, because we're really connecting with inner goodness, and that is feeding us. So people look, they sometimes feel sorry for me. They're like, why would you live alone on a mountain? Why would you like have a job that has a very uncertain income, in poverty, alone, you know, looking weird, wearing a bed sheet, no hair? Why would you cut off your hair and not have sex and have no money and, you know, live in the middle of nowhere? Like, that's a punishment, you know. But if your meditation's going well, if you're having samadhi, concentration, you don't need a lot. You can live simply and you're nourished by that, you know. So those of us who live in the bush probably know we're nourished by the bush, and we like the more we connect with nature and simplicity, the less we need other things, you know. Or if you're someone who has a really nice family life, those healthy relationships, or, you know, even if you have animals, like, they just give you so much love that you don't need as much, you know. Like, you don't just sit around going, I need to renovate my house for the 5th time, or I need an in-ground swimming pool, because you're just nourished by inner things. So mindfulness leading to investigation, leading to energy, leading to joy, and then leading to tranquility, which is where the mind becomes really nice and blissful and concentrated. I guess for the person who's not like a really intensive meditator, it could be a bit like after a yoga class where your mind feels kind of nice and blissful, or like after a really nice massage where you feel this wholesome, you know, stillness, where your mind is happy and it just stops for a while. And then concentration, which is like a really refined kind of concentration where your mind becomes almost single-pointed, and you can rest in that for many hours, very blissful. Like people are like, why do you give up sex? And it's like, because this is better. Like, if you can get this, it's not easy. Because you have this inner bliss, this inner completeness, which we all need to find, because external relationships and validation are very impermanent. You know, one day, especially if you're a famous person, like one day people love you, and then all you have to say is one bad thing, and then they hate you, and you know, there are people ripping up your picture and setting fire to photos of you, and so, you know, that kind of love can be very impermanent, or that kind of validation. Like, you can be at the top of your game, you can be the CEO of the company, and you turn 65 or 70 and they're retiring you, or they're, you know, you could be someone's loved trophy wife, and as soon as you start showing age, they're like, okay, I need someone 30 years younger. So it's like that validation never lasts. You know, that's why you need that inner kind of refuge, because life is just life is rough, life is impermanent, you know. So don't put your validation, your sense of fulfillment and well-being on those outer hooks, you know. I mean, of course it's very human to do so and natural in some ways, but those things don't last. That's why we need to build that inner refuge for, you know, for the calm in the storm. And that blissful concentration really gives a sense of fulfillment, you know. And for that, it's better to go on retreat, you know, maybe 2 weeks a year or something, to you really get a sense of that inner peace. And then finally comes equanimity. I mean, spiritual people talk about this boundless universal love, which when you really try, seems really hard. It's really hard to love someone who believes that what is natural for you is an abomination or wrong, or that you don't have any beauty or value, you know, in their eyes, because they're looking at you in a really objectifying or dehumanizing way. And I mean, I think capitalism looks at workers in that way, like, you're just what you can produce, and if you can't produce anything, you're not useful, you're not valid, you're not worth respect. And then, yeah, we have like objectification that happens in relationships as well. I'm sure you all know about that, so I don't need to go into that too much. But equanimity is this mind of impartiality that sees both sides of the coin. You know, like, you can look deeply into the eyes of someone you don't really like, or someone who really challenges you, and you can see their humanity, and you can see that the seed of Buddha nature is in them, despite all the things that you might find really offensive, or that you don't understand, you know. And that you can look at life with a sense of equanimity, in the sense that, you know, I've been really good at some things and I've failed at some things, but I know my value is here, so I don't need to constantly seek other people's validation, because I know my own value, even if capitalism, or, you know, the dating market, or even if so-called normal people don't understand me, I know my own value, you know. But also humility, like, I know my faults and I know my good points, and irregardless of all of those things, there is this undying luminous nature that is just makes everybody sacred, makes life sacred. And out of this deep understanding that everybody is valuable, that everybody has goodness inside them, there is this kind of peace, this broad way of seeing, that it's like, you know, a little ship, when a wave comes, it easily tossed, but a big ship, like a big cruise ship, the wave comes and it's just, because it's very heavy and it's very big, it just adjusts its center of balance very easily. or like